Hey there, it's me. Welcome back. Rob Natelson runs our constitutional studies at the Independence Institute. Rob, I wanted to first thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
You can Tebow with me.
I can Tebow.
When I've been noticing a lot on national media, more and more emphasis on the Constitution. It's as if
Yeah.
a lot of commentators, talking heads, newspaper and magazine reporters say, oh, wait a second, people rioting about government. Maybe there's this renewed interest in constitutional studies. Am I wrong on this?
No,
Because
you're absolutely.
yeah,
you're absolutely right.
I'm 47 years old, and if I read it right now, there's more interest in what the founders' intent was on the Constitution than before.
Well, I think there's a widespread understanding that we wouldn't be in such deep trouble financially if the limits on the federal government and the Constitution had actually been honored. You've also got a lot of people who are genuinely interested in it. At the Independence Institute programs on the Constitution, we're getting sellout crowds, hundreds of people filling the rooms. And it's just a lot of interest in it.
But on both sides, I mean, it's odd when I see liberals and conservatives both, wagging the Constitution, saying, "You can't do this to me, government." I see the Occupy people screaming, "I've got a First Amendment right," and I see Tea Party people going, "You can't do that. It's not enumerated in the Constitution." And so it seems as though it morphs into what you want it to be.
Yeah, and that's a very, very common problem on all sides with the Constitution. Let me tell you what I think, though, distinguishes this time from other times, and that is that among a very large portion of the population, loosely described as the Tea Party, they are very genuinely interested in what the Constitution was really intended to mean. Sometimes when I talk to these folks, I have to deliver messages that they might want to hear. For example, I have to tell them, well, yeah, paper money really is constitutional. The Constitution permits the government to print that. Not that most people in the Tea Party don't believe that, but there's always a hard core that take a very strict rule. And
the income tax was never ratified.
Well,
never ratified.
That's the other one. Yeah, but the point here is that they're very open to what the Constitution actually means. I think some of the stuff that's come out in response to the Tea Party's interest has been more opportunistic, where they try to rewrite or to cherry pick from history in order to make a point.
Let's go into a couple cases in point. There was a Time article that you retorted. There's also a Vanity Fair. Now, Vanity Fair is an interesting magazine because one, it's got hot chicks and makeup ads, and then it's got intellectuals who Christopher Hitchens and others who expound. This one from Simon Johnston and James Kirk: the Tea Party is intent on undermining the federal government itself. Its leaders claim the federal government is illegitimate or unconstitutional. Now, I've been to a lot of Tea Party events. I don't even call myself a Tea Partier. I don't remember saying that the federal government is illegitimate or unconstitutional. I say that some of their actions, I believe, are.
Yeah, I don't know where they got that idea for that charge. I don't know if these gentlemen have ever been to a Tea Party meeting or read Tea Party literature. They also claim in the article that Tea Partiers don't think the federal government should have the right to tax. And most of the article was about how it was necessary at the founding of the Republic to tax in order to put the credit of the United States on a firm basis. And that's all true. But nobody in the Tea Party, to my knowledge, is saying the federal government shouldn't tax. What they're saying is the power has been abused. The federal government has gone too far. It does a lot of things it wasn't supposed to do, and therefore we need to pay down our debt, and we need to do that by cutting the programs that are not authorized.
Give me a few of the things that you believe have gone too far. You've written a brief that goes into the Obamacare case, a amicus brief that talks about the role of government there. But really, beyond Obamacare, we've argued this many times. What else? I mean, what is it that guys on your side are screaming, you can't do that, it's not in this piece of paper?
Well, in the Obamacare case, what makes it such an interesting case in the modern Supreme Court is the mandate, the requirement that everybody buy health insurance, and also the mandates on the states that they expand their Medicaid program in a very expensive way. But there's the whole question of whether the federal government should be regulating insurance at all. For 150 years, the Supreme Court consistently held properly, according to what the founder said, that insurance is a state matter. There's only one Supreme Court case to hold the contrary, and I think that case is wrong. It's clear that when the federal government gets involved in supporting a Frisbee museum in Podunk, Ohio, that they're outside their level of constitutional competence. One of the rules in the Constitution is that the federal government is supposed to tax only for general welfare programs, not for some special interest or for some locality. And then there are the entitlements. I mean, there are grave constitutional questions regarding programs like Medicaid, for example, that have a major role in driving up the deficit. Before Medicaid was adopted in 1965, Medicaid being the program to aid the health care of the poor, every state in the union had programs already for helping the poor.
Interestingly,
but the feds had to get involved.
Interestingly, all the states except one have gotten rid of their state programs.
Yeah.
There's only one single state in the union that still has their original program to help the elderly, and that's in Colorado. That's right. So people can move in and retire, never put a dime into the system, and pull money from the old age pension fund. It's a good deal. It's good to know that we're numbered 49 again.
Right.
So, all right. Talk to me a little bit about the media coverage of the Constitution. If you have one major beef with what you've seen on television, radio, and Time magazine, this article in Vanity Fair, what is it? I mean, boil it down for me.
The big beef is people trying to lecture us about what the Constitution means when they don't really have a clue as to what it's all about. I mean, this article is a great example. The person they cite and they rely upon for their evidence of constitutional meaning is Alexander Hamilton. Now, Alexander Hamilton was a very great man, but as he himself said, nobody's views were more divergent from what the Constitution actually meant than his were. He was what we would today call an extremist or out of the mainstream. And yet this particular article relies upon Alexander Hamilton as their primary source for constitutional
How would they know? It's Vanity Fair. You know, it's not, you know, you go into their offices, they've got stacks of model magazines and the latest advertisements from perfume companies. They've got a constitutional expert there who's going to argue, well, really, you should be going back to the Federalist Papers if you really want to get
in the first place, the authors of this particular article are not staffers at Vanity Fair. One is an international economist, the other is an international consultant. But what they need to do before lecturing us on the founding is crack a book. You know, there are plenty of very good books out there, partly because of this great resurgence of information that you talk about, and almost any of them covering the Constitution would tell you that Hamilton's not the go-to guy for constitutional meaning.
When people are watching, reading, getting this information that people are arguing over the Constitution, what are the top couple questions someone should ask? Whether it's from our side, from their side, when a news story is presented and somebody's screaming, this is unconstitutional, or this is constitutional, we need to get back to these founding principles. What questions?
There's no one question, John. What you have to do,
couple.
you have to educate yourself. I mean, the Constitution is supposed to be covered in high school. What I discovered in teaching at the graduate school level is that many of the students who came into my law classes, second year of law school, to learn constitutional law, didn't know, for example, that the federal government was a government of only listed or enumerated powers. So rather than relying on one enumerated power, the power to tax, good example.
Article 1, Section 8.
Clause 1, that's right.
We should get T-shirts that say Article 1, Section 8.
Yeah, but that's what people need to do. They need to read for their own and to try to get a book written by somebody who doesn't have a big axe to grind, because most people talking in this area do have a huge axe to grind.
Unlike state constitutions everywhere, unlike other founding documents, the Declaration and the Constitution are actually still readable today and very, very short. If you were to read the original Constitution, I know there's lots of changes that happened with choosing electoral votes and senators being elected this way and that way, and secession plans, I'm forgetting which amendment. But if someone just sits down and reads the Constitution, would a complete neophyte end up having a pretty good understanding of what it says and what it means?
A surprisingly good understanding. Now, a neophyte might not know some of the refinements, right? You have to know the background of some of the clauses. A little bit of the language has changed. But that's one of the great merits of the United States Constitution, that even after more than 200 years, we can still sit down and understand most of it fairly readily. Now, there are some clauses in there.
So this is not like the Hebrew scrolls that you go out there and you hold. I forget what it is, and you hold it and you read each word and translate it.
It's not even like the Colorado Constitution, which is much longer and in places much more inscrutable. Now, there are clauses in the U.S. Constitution, and sometimes they'll come up from behind you and catch you unaware that they have specialized meaning. They're specialized legal clauses like necessary and proper, or privileges and immunities. But those you can look up in any number of good resources that are out there.
There's always seems to be this subtle argument between a living, breathing Constitution and one that is carved in stone. The living and breathing Constitution means that, listen, founders were good guys, but they didn't have the internet. They didn't have Google. They didn't have what we have now. In the Constitution, the principles are what matter, not the specifics as much. So therefore, the principles and the laws should bend as the times require. We're not walking around on saddleback. We're not traveling in stagecoaches. This is a whole different world. What was written 200 years ago just can't apply.
John, in my experience, those people who argue for a living Constitution, really what they want is often a dead Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution is or one of its purposes is to limit politicians. And many advocates of a living Constitution basically want to free the politicians to do whatever the politicians want to do. It is a caricature of the Constitution to say that everything in it is written in stone. There are parts of it that are quite rigid and designed to be so. The president has a 4-year term, not a 3.5-year term, not a 4.5-year term, but a 3-year term. But on the other hand, many provisions in the Constitution are written with significant play in the joints, not as much as a living constitutionalist would like there to be.
Give me an example. We've got about a minute left. So.
Sure. A good example would be the necessary and proper clause, which gives the Congress the power to actually regulate areas not listed in the Constitution if certain technical criteria
if it's necessary and proper.
Yeah. Well, it's a little more complicated than that, but there's flexibility. There's play in the joints there.
People want to get involved in the Constitution to get a first look. Other than reading it, where's the place to go?
Well, naturally, I think a great place to go is my own book, which is called The Original Constitution, What It Actually Said and Meant. It's available at Amazon. If you want a view of the modern Constitution as well, the Heritage Guide to the Constitution is a great resource.
At heritage.org. Thank you so much, and thank you. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. Check us out at independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA. Trust me, I'm better than Salmonex. We'll see you next week.